After analyzing the narrative of the life of Frederick Douglass, I found that the message he portrays to the reader is not only to inform us on the situations he faced as a slave, but to encourage us to be more and strive to be better. I chose this particular topic because we are at a time in our country when guidance is needed most. I'll first start by expressing my opinion on the African American community in relation to the narrative. It is evident that African Americans have overcome many barriers, such as slavery. Even years after, African Americans are still faced with white supremacy, such as segregation of schools. I address this issue because of Douglass's strong desire to learn and his willingness to go beyond measure, even risking his life to educate himself. Douglass, being a former slave, would have wanted nothing more than equal rights for African Americans. Douglass's silent attempt at gaining an education earned him respect then and now. Because of Douglass's courageous acts, we have the Civil Rights era, a period when African Americans came together and made some of the greatest efforts at standing up for what they believe in and demanding a voice in America. Today, we see that African Americans are still enslaved and are among the oppressed in America. Police brutality. This is something that is not just starting, but something that has never stopped. From the whips on the backs of slaves, to Dr. King and his protesters being hosed down in Birmingham, to the exponential killings of African Americans today, the brutality has never stopped. One thing all these periods have in common is that they used their voice to speak out for what they believed in. After many failed attempts at silencing African Americans, they continue to thrive and empower others by telling them of past experiences and ways to overcome oppression, much like the narrative of Douglass does. I have a dream, the famous words of Dr. Martin Luther King. My generation often heard these words as children. Make it happen. You are the future. You can change the world. These are things my peers and I heard as children, and it stuck with us. We are now the young men and women facing mental enslavement. We are surrounded with money, fame, sex, and drugs. These are the key elements that lead to the downfall of African Americans. Because of these things, African Americans have lost interest in gaining an education and have fell victim to one of these four factors. There are still many very much like Douglass who have a thirst for knowledge. Knowledge is power, and to keep African Americans from becoming powerful, they are constantly stripped of opportunities to grow. This includes low-income housing, Medicare, programs like WIC and Head Start. These are organizations structured around helping people until they are able to do better, not to make it a lifestyle. This is evident in Section 8 housing, which is filled with drugs, ignorance, and people lacking the will to live a better life. These things have an effect on the youth, and as they grow older, they tend to follow similar paths. These paths lead to impoverishment. As you can see on your screen, I've attached a few statistics pertaining to income, unemployment, and poverty rate. These can be found on cnnmoney.com. First, you see the percentage of home ownership where blacks are of the lowest percentile, 29.5% below the white community and 3.7% below the Hispanic. Unemployment rate, blacks are of the highest, placing them 4.8% above the white and 2.9% above the Hispanic community. Lastly, we have poverty rate, where blacks are also of the highest, placing them 16.1% above the white and 2.6% above the Hispanics. These are things that result in the case of oppression and African Americans struggling to break free from that oppression. Actor and activist Jesse Williams spoke briefly upon receiving the Humanitarian Award. He speaks on the matters of a system built to impoverish African Americans, police brutality, and how more African Americans are killed than whites. He speaks on conditional freedom, and what this means is that America gives everyone free rights, but when African Americans start to express these rights freely, it becomes a problem. African Americans have always struggled to have a voice in America. Because of Douglass and many others' efforts to gain an education, in 2008, the first African American president, Barack Obama, was elected. This was the first time in history African Americans had a voice in America, the most powerful voice in America. This is proof that with knowledge, anything is possible. I chose to make this video because it was a class project, but through numerous readings, research, and essays, it opened my eyes to see that I have a voice, and I choose to use it in the most powerful way possible, and that is to educate others. Thank you.